For 28 years, she was the heartbeat of the company. She remembered every birthday. She brought home-baked snickerdoodles to every board meeting. She sent handwritten cards to employees going through difficult times, illness, bereavement, the kinds of life events that the corporate world has no official protocol for, but that Mabel Johnson had an instinct for, that no protocol could have produced. She was the person the executives called when they couldn't find something. She was the person new hires were told to talk to when they didn't understand how things worked. She was, in every human sense, the institutional memory and the institutional warmth of Velocom Systems. She was also, for the last decade of those 28 years, systematically and brilliantly stealing from it. $52 million. 50 ghost employees, 10 years. A floral patterned home office and a legacy banking system that she understood better than the people who had built it. Welcome to Corporate Chaos Scandals, the place for the most shocking and unbelievable workplace confession stories. From office drama to hidden secrets, nothing is off limits. Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe and like, because we bring you stories like this every week. Her name is Mabel Johnson, 67 years old at the time of her arrest. Born in a small town in the English Midlands, came to the United States in her early 30s with a husband who had a job offer and an optimism about California that the climate validated even when other things did not. She had joined Velocom Systems at 39, which was not entry-level in years, but was entry-level in role. A payroll administrator position that required precision, discretion, and the ability to manage complex compensation structures across a workforce that was, even then, growing rapidly. Velocom Systems was a technology infrastructure company that had begun as a regional telecoms business and had expanded, over 2 decades of acquisition and development, into a significant player in the data management and enterprise software market. Billion-dollar revenues, offices in 8 states, a workforce that had peaked at 4,200 people, the kind of company that appeared in industry rankings and featured in business school case studies and that, from the outside, had the robust and layered infrastructure of an organization that knew what it was doing. From the inside, from the specific inside of a payroll department that had been running on the same core legacy software system since 1997, it was a different picture. Mabel had been there when the payroll system was installed. She had been there through 4 company presidents, 2 major acquisitions, a near bankruptcy in the early 2000s, a recovery, and a second expansion that took the company's valuation back to 10 figures. She had been there through every mass layoff, and there had been several because the technology sector had a particular and recurring relationship with mass layoffs, with the regularity of a tide that surprised people each time it arrived, even though it had always arrived before. And she had been there long enough, and had understood the system deeply enough, and had the specific combination of access and knowledge and institutional trust that is the most dangerous thing a financial system can give a single person, to know exactly where the system didn't look. The legacy payroll system at Velocom was not, in itself, unusual for a company of its age. It had been state-of-the-art in 1997. The company had upgraded around it, new interfaces layered on top, new reporting tools connected to it, a more modern HR management system that fed into it. But the core, the engine, the place where the actual payroll calculations happened and from which the actual payment files were generated, that was the original 1997 system, running on infrastructure that the IT department maintained with the specific mixture of competence and resignation of people who have been told repeatedly that a full system migration is on the roadmap, and have been waiting long enough that they no longer fully believe it. The gap that Mabel had found was a product of two things colliding. The first was the layoff process. When Velocom conducted mass layoffs, and they had conducted 7 significant ones in the 28 years of Mabel's tenure, the process worked as follows. HR generated a termination list. The list was sent to payroll. Payroll updated the system to reflect the departures. The terminated employees' records were moved to an archived status. This was the process. It was a human process, which meant it was dependent on a human, specifically in the payroll department, on Mabel, executing it completely and accurately. The second thing was the archive status itself. In the 1997 system, an archived employee record didn't cease to exist in the payroll processing engine. It moved to a different status code, and an archived record with a status code that Mabel could access and modify through her administrative credentials was, if anyone wanted to be precise about it, a record that could be returned to active status at will. Not through the HR system. The HR system would correctly show the employee as terminated. But in the payroll processing engine, underneath the interface, in the place where the payment files were generated from, the record was whatever Mabel's access said it was. She had discovered this gap in year 18 of her tenure. She had not planned to use it. She had filed it the way she filed everything, in the systematic mental archive of someone who pays close attention and remembers what she notices. She had actually, at the time, considered flagging it to the IT department as a compliance vulnerability. She had decided not to, for a reason that she described, years later, to investigators with a directness that surprised them. She had not flagged it because she had, in year 18, just been through the 4th mass layoff at Velocom, and the 4th mass layoff had eliminated 23 colleagues whom she had known for years and had brought home-baked goods to and had sent handwritten cards to, and the company had, in the same quarter as this layoff, paid its executive team a combined $47 million in performance bonuses. She had looked at the gap in the system. She had thought about the $47 million. She had thought about the 23 colleagues. She had not flagged the gap. Instead, in the following month, during the routine processing of the termination list from the 4th layoff, she had missed 3 names. Just missed them. In the ordinary human error language of a payroll department, in a busy post-layoff period, with hundreds of records to process and a system interface that required individual record-by-record updates, she had simply missed 3. Except she had not missed them. She had chosen them. The 3 initial ghost employees received their regular salaries, paid on the normal cycle, into accounts that had previously been their own, and that Mabel had, through a process that required a specific kind of access that her administrative credentials provided, and that she had refined over several months of careful preparation before the first miss, now redirected to intermediate accounts that she controlled. The 3 employees did not receive any communications from Velocom after their termination, because they had been terminated through the HR system, and the HR system correctly showed them as no longer active. No termination letter triggered from payroll, no benefits communications, no W-2 at year-end. That was the delicate part, and Mabel had thought about it carefully, and had found, in the system's architecture, a reporting flag that could suppress the year-end tax document generation for records in a specific status combination that she could create. The IRS interface, which generated its filings from the HR system rather than the payroll engine, did not see these employees because the HR system said they were gone. 3 ghost employees, each paying into intermediate accounts she controlled, redirected through a structure she built incrementally over the first 2 years, offshore in part, domestic trust structures in part, sufficiently layered that the flow from Velocom's payroll accounts to anything attributable to Mabel was not visible in any single transaction, but required the assembly of multiple data sources to reconstruct. She expanded in the second year. The fifth mass layoff arrived on schedule. She missed 7 names. By year 5, she had 50 active ghost employees, former colleagues, all properly terminated through HR, all invisible to the company's operational systems, all generating regular salary payments into her network of intermediate accounts. The salaries were real salaries, the salaries those employees had been receiving at the time of their termination, maintained at those levels, generating a monthly outflow from Velocom's payroll that was absorbed in the overall payroll budget without triggering any variance flag, because the payroll budget was set by forecasting that used the HR system headcount, and the HR system showed these employees as gone. The amount that moved out of Velocom's payroll and into Mabel Johnson's structure over 10 years was $52 million. She brought snickerdoodles to the board meeting the month she crossed $30 million. She used a recipe she had been refining for 15 years. The CFO told her they were the best batch yet. What did Mabel do with $52 million? This is the question that the investigators, the journalists, and the people who eventually heard this story found most striking, because the answer was not what any of them expected. She did not buy a yacht. She did not purchase a property in the south of France. She did not acquire art or jewelry or any of the visible markers of sudden, significant wealth that would have, in themselves, been a flag to anyone paying attention. She bought her daughter a house, a modest house, in a suburb of Sacramento, the kind that was in a good school district and had a garden big enough for children. She helped her son clear a business debt that had been causing him significant distress. She established a college fund for each of her 4 grandchildren. She paid off her own mortgage, a small house that she had lived in for 22 years, and that had been within a standard mortgage of being paid off already, so the acceleration was not dramatic. She gave to charity, meaningfully but not excessively. Local organizations, the kind that did the specific, unglamorous work of community support rather than the kind that appeared in newspapers. The remainder, the majority, sat in accounts she had built to hold it. She was not spending it. She was not converting it into lifestyle. She was, it appeared from the forensic accounting, storing it with the same methodical patience she had stored everything else in her life. Her attorneys asked her, in the early stages of the investigation, what the plan had been for the funds she had accumulated. She said, "I hadn't entirely decided yet." Her attorney said, "In 10 years you hadn't decided." She said, "I'm a careful person." This was, in the circumstances, an almost incomprehensible piece of understatement, but it was also, in its specific way, completely true. The discovery did not come from any internal audit. It did not come from the CFO, or the executive team, or the board, or the IT department. It came from a junior accountant named Marcus Webb, who had been at Velocom for 8 months, and who had been assigned, as part of his onboarding rotation, a reconciliation task comparing the HR system headcount figures to the payroll processing system output for a routine quarterly review. He was 24 years old. He had been using the payroll system for 6 weeks. He had not yet absorbed the institutional assumption that the reconciliation was a formality rather than an exercise in genuine scrutiny. He treated it as a genuine exercise in genuine scrutiny because that was what he had been asked to do, and he was the kind of person who did what he was asked to do. The discrepancy he found was, at the level of any individual record, invisible. But across the full dataset, the head count in the payroll processing engine was consistently, month by month, above the head count in the HR system by a number that ranged between 47 and 53, depending on the month. Not dramatically, not in a way that should have been alarming to someone who understood why it might exist. But Marcus didn't yet understand why it might exist, and so he asked. He asked his supervisor. His supervisor said it was probably a reconciliation lag from the most recent layoff cycle, and asked him to document the discrepancy for the quarterly report. Marcus documented it. But he also, because he was 24 years old and had been in the job for 8 months, and had the specific curiosity of someone who had not yet been trained to accept a partial answer, ran his own comparison. He pulled the records of the employees who appeared in the payroll engine, but not in the HR system. He pulled their termination dates from the HR archive. He looked at when they had stopped appearing in one system and continued appearing in the other. Some of them had been terminated 4 years ago, some 6, some 9. He printed the report. He put it in an envelope. He walked it to the CFO's office. The CFO looked at the report for approximately 3 minutes. Then she called the company's external auditors. The investigation lasted 8 months. The forensic accounting team that the external auditors brought in was thorough and experienced, and the architecture Mabel had built, which was sophisticated, was not undetectable. It was detectable by people who were specifically looking for it with the right tools and the right mandate. Those people found it, layer by layer, account by account, across 8 months of work that Mabel's attorneys later described as the most comprehensive payroll fraud reconstruction they had encountered. Mabel was arrested at her home, not at the office. She had, by the time the investigation was at the point of arrest, retired from Velocom. She had retired 13 months prior, on schedule, with a send-off that her colleagues had organized, and that had included, because this was Mabel Johnson, snickerdoodles, homemade. Still the best batch yet, according to the CFO, who had been eating them for 18 years, and who now had to sit across from investigators and explain how she had not known. The CFO had not known because the system had not told her, because the system had been built to not tell her by the person who understood the system better than anyone else in the organization, over 28 years of patient and complete institutional trust. This is the specific indictment of the situation that the external auditors included in their report. The fraud was not made possible by any single failure of internal control. It was made possible by the accumulation of 18 years of trust that had progressively reduced the oversight applied to a single individual who had progressively become the system rather than a person operating within the system. By the time the ghost employees began, Mabel Johnson was not supervised in any meaningful operational sense because she was the operational sense. She was convicted on 9 counts: wire fraud, payroll fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. The sentencing guidelines for the aggregate of those counts across the scale of the fraud were significant. She received 5 years. The mitigation that her attorneys presented, the absence of personal lifestyle enrichment at the level you would expect from $52 million, the specific charitable expenditures, the profile of a woman who had been demonstrably warm and genuinely invested in the people around her for 3 decades, was factored into the sentencing in ways that the prosecutors felt did not adequately reflect the scale of the offense and the duration of the deception. The judge had the sentencing memoranda from both sides and made the call she made. Mabel served 4 of the 5 years. She is currently living in Sacramento, 3 streets from the house she bought her daughter. Her grandchildren are in school. The college funds she established are still intact. The recovery process addressed the offshore and trust structures, but was not structured in a way that reached the educational accounts, which were in the grandchildren's names, and which had been established early enough in the scheme's operation that their provenance was sufficiently removed from the direct fraud proceeds to survive the asset recovery. Mabel attends the children's school events. She brings things. People who encounter her in these settings describe her as warm and attentive, and the kind of person who remembers your name after one meeting and the details of what you told her. She no longer bakes snickerdoodles professionally. But the recipe, her daughter has confirmed, is still in regular rotation. Marcus Webb, the 24-year-old junior accountant who ran his own comparison and printed the report and walked it to the CFO's office, was promoted twice in the 18 months following the investigation. He is currently the head of internal audit at Velocom. He has redesigned the quarterly reconciliation process from the ground up. He runs it himself every quarter. He does not treat it as a formality. He is 26 years old. He has already found one additional discrepancy, a smaller one, a genuine administrative error rather than a fraud, that was corrected before it became anything more than what it was. He will find the next one too. That is the story of Mabel Johnson. 28 years, 50 ghost employees, $52 million, and the junior accountant who had been there 8 months and hadn't yet learned to treat a reconciliation as a formality. Drop a comment below. Does Mabel get any sympathy from you? The snickerdoodles, the birthday cards, the money going to grandchildren's college funds rather than a yacht. Does any of that change the way you see the $52 million? Tell me where you land, because this one always splits people right down the middle. And if you are not subscribed to corporate chaos scandals, right now is the moment. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone. We are here every single week with stories that prove that the most dangerous person in any building is the one everybody trusts completely. I'll see you in the next one.